The Return, Chapter 19, Havarian. Saam slept on that morning. He slept very heavily. Sometime during the night, Keriss had almost tenderly moved his hands away from his face. Had Talon been there, she would have done the same thing. Since Osaka, he had begun again to sleep in a pugilist's pose, fists clenched, his arms wrapped protectively over his face and head. Here was the reason for those tight muscles in his shoulders, the headaches. Keriss gentled his hands down, nuzzled his neck, saying softly, "You're safe." Then he let him sleep. Saam did not see Keriss wake, take a leisurely shower, nor his pretty, deranged assistant, filling him in on his appointments for the day, nor the hatred in the look she gave him as he sprawled asleep on the disordered bed, nor the way she wrinkled her nose in disgust at the smell of sweat and sex. Tor came to see the consul, and Saam slept on. The young Hannath smiled happily down on him. 6 weeks. He'd been working on Saam for 6 weeks now, and they had come a long way. He was still perhaps a little shaky, but his physical recovery had been remarkable. He'd not met anyone with Saam's drive to survive. It struck him as odd that Saam had never once asked when he could go home. He had work, he had friends, he must surely have a lover. But once the terrifying after-effects of the drugs had left his mind clear, he seemed to accept his lot almost placidly. He ate, he exercised, he made friends among the servants, played cards with Tor, and never once asked when he could leave. Tor so wanted to ask Keriss how the night had gone, but manners forbade it. Judging by the peaceful way Saam was sleeping, all had gone well. "Bad news, I'm afraid. The Nadiv are insisting on seeing him." Insisting? Consul Keriss raised his eyebrows slightly. "They want to bring in their own doctor to check on him, reassure themselves that he's recovering, not being held against his will." He looked down at the contentedly post-coital Saam and smiled. "If they had seen what we were handed at the start, they wouldn't be so surprised at the length of time it has taken." Keriss seemed not to care what did or did not surprise the Nadiv. "Very well, but not today. He's going to give us Havarian tonight. I'm looking forward to it. I don't want it spoiled." "What, the whole thing?" Tor tried not to look aghast. It was not unusual for the community to eat in the open air on summer nights, so few special arrangements were needed beyond clearing a space for the performance and organizing a traditional costume. Loose white pants, a flowing open white gown, knee-length. Not unlike the yoga costume Saam had inadvertently borrowed at Nadia's apartment. Paint around the eyes, rings on the fingers to make his hands more visible, paint on his finger ends. It should have been the ornate silver filigree finger extensions that custom dictated for the performers of Havarian, but even Keriss had not yet tracked down the traditional jewellery. Not yet. Saam had run through the chosen section in his head several times, gratified that the hand gestures came back to him so readily. He stood for a moment before he began, struck by the surrealism of the event. More Hannath than he had seen since he lived there, or raided there. He wondered if he should be afraid, but looked across at Keriss and felt completely safe. He performed for a little less than an hour one main section of the epic, which ran close on 8 hours in total. He picked a piece that included both drama and humour, his own favourite piece. He performed standing as tradition dictated, and was content that the Hannath, judging by their total silence, seemed pleased with his efforts. Keriss, in particular, seemed deeply gratified. Then he walked across to the arbour and led the old gardener across to the performance space. Thanks to Tor's efforts, one eye was now completely restored. The other would take longer, but would improve. But since he was still a little unsteady in the dark, Saam helped him to his place. He was wearing the same outfit as Saam, but black, the same eye paint, the same rings. While he stood solidly, Saam kneeled up in front of him, facing the diners. There are few songs in Havarian, and no one here other than Tor had heard them for 20 years. But some of the company started to recognize what was happening and began murmuring. The chosen song was about 2 soldiers, one older, one younger, who had formed a love bond during an appalling war. In the time when Havarian was written, this was not frowned upon. It was simply a love song between 2 men. Now it was one of the few such songs that could be performed in polite company. Saam's voice was sweet and pure as the younger soldier, but it was the Xonak who surprised them. Deep, mellow chest tones, a breadth of tone, a richness of voice that only years of training could produce. The words talked about loss, how the young man felt when the elder died and left him to fend for himself. As they sang, they both performed the same ritual hand movements, the flowing, balletic, stylized gestures that, when done perfectly in time, were wonderful to watch. They were flawless. Every finger was perfect in every gesture. Many of the words were familiar to the listeners who mouthed them as they came up in the song. They sang of separation, of sleeping alone with no one to hold, with no one to embrace, of facing the fear and pain of each day with no one to turn to for comfort or support. The younger man told of closing his eyes at night and imagining his lover there beside him. The final soaring chorus where the 2 harmonized was exquisite. They were left frozen, heads slightly bowed in sadness, their hands held up in the prescribed gesture of farewell and mourning. Hannath do not applaud. They show their respect by being silent, so the long silence that followed the song was pleasing to the 2 performers. Saam helped Daniel Levin back to his room, where his young Kerrigath assistant, who had listened to the song with awe, was grinning fit to burst. "It was beautiful," he said. Saam nodded. Yes, it was. He hugged them both in thanks. He was heading back to the central court when Keriss waylaid him in the arbour. He grabbed him by the waist, his hands under the flowing costume, hauled him against his chest and kissed him. They made love silently on the grass with the blue flowers. They woke cold in the early hours, and Keriss carried him to his room. Saam made token resistance, but really, what was the point? They made love again. This time neither of them felt the need to be quiet. Later he woke to find Keriss on top of him, facing him, and he followed the Hannath's gentle nudges, his murmured instructions, to let him have his pleasure. The Hannath's mouth was on him the whole time, and when he climaxed, Saam joined him, weeping with the ecstasy of it. It was still dark when Keriss woke alone. He had only a few minutes to be concerned before he heard Saam entering stealthily. He was wearing nothing but Keriss's robe, an unimaginable act of disrespect, and carrying an armful of fruit. He grinned widely, saying, "I was hungry. I didn't want to wake you." Keriss was processing. He wasn't sure how to feel. "Did you go to the kitchen like that?" Softly, calm before storm. Saam said blithely, "That's where they keep the food." He dumped the fruit on the bed, then dropped the robe from his naked shoulders. Keriss watched the extreme care he took to fold it perfectly. Done automatically, deftly, without thinking, the way a trained slave would handle a master's robe. Saam turned to him grinning, then stopped. It had taken him some time to feel the frost in the room, since he was carrying so much warmth of his own from the night before. His face fell. Fuck, the robe. He walked naked, full of dread, across to Keriss, wondering how to apologize. He could see that Keriss was waiting for an apology, annoyed but hoping Saam would make it right. He opened his mouth to reassure him that no one had seen him. Then something shifted in his head. He said, "Pear or banana?" Keriss started to say something, but Saam climbed on top of him, kneeling astride him, kissing him on the mouth. When he stopped to breathe, he said, "It's only a fucking robe, Keriss." Then he kissed him again. They spent most of the morning kissing and pleasing each other. Nazar came in 3 times to discuss his appointments, but each time they were either wrapped up in each other or asleep. Her hatred was ready to burst out of her chest. They awoke close to lunchtime, still tired and sated. Saam made a token move to touch him, but Keriss pushed him softly away, laughing, "Now you're being ridiculous." He kissed his nose and looked at Saam's face. "I'm not sure about the paint around the eyes. You look like a house cat. Yes, I know." Keriss kissed him softly for a while, then asked, "How did you know about the gardener?" "Daniel Levin. I knew his name. I had heard him sing on Hannath at the estate, the night the Emperor stayed." He looked at Keriss's beautiful face. "You were there." "What?" "The little brother. You were there." Of course, the night his sister's ghastly husband had entertained the Emperor. He recalled that ridiculously painted, over-perfumed carrot boy holding the Emperor's wine, the enormous mop of intricately decorated hair, the nauseating way the men put their hands on him when they thought themselves unobserved, the lost, quietly despairing look in the boy's golden eyes when they did it, the masking smile he gave when anyone looked at him. "I wasn't that young," he argued. Samran laughed softly. "You seemed like an adult to me." He smiled and said, "Well, a stripling." "You stank of perfume." Imagine how I felt about it. I was almost dizzy from the fumes. "I spoke to you." He was trying to remember. It was a long time ago. "You spoke to me." Keriss thought, and Saam prompted him. "The kitchen. I was sent to the kitchen for more wine." "Ah, I was coming to look for something to eat that wasn't disgusting." Saam offered, "Neil's food was plain. Perhaps you should have tried that." "You were coming out of the kitchen. One of the girls was touching you, teasing you, and you were letting her do it." He smirked, thinking how little Samran had changed. "And you said, I said that will get you into trouble someday." Saam said seriously, "I nearly wet myself in fright. I dropped the wine. I caught it. Then you laughed. You smiled at me, handed me the wine, and went into the kitchen." "I was hungry." "And you were right. It did get me into trouble." They kissed a little longer, then a pause. "You should ask him to tell you how he came here. Daniel, ask him. It's a good story. For almost 20 years, one of the best baritones on Hannath has been quietly weeding your garden." They were asleep again when Nazar finally decided to move things along. She stood over them until Keriss opened his eyes. Saam was sleeping with his hands curled under his chin like a child. Not a natural position for him. One that occurred when Keriss pushed his fist gently away from protecting his face as he slept. He looked vulnerable and sweet. Nazar wanted to rip his face off. She said tonelessly, The Nadif have been waiting for you for almost 2 hours. And Keriss, at least, was finally awake.